morning, everyone. Here we are again. This is the Saturday of the fourth weekend of the Global Empowerment Summit, the third Global Empowerment Summit, bringing together change makers from all around the world with 130 speakers coming, lining up week by week. This is the fourth week, so you already must have had around, 120 interviews in total, and also panel discussions, and we had networking events, and next to it, we are also running our master classes. So this weekend, we have again an amazing, exciting lineup. The lineup started yesterday with speakers who were already touching on the topic of sustainability in digital transformation. We had our digital transformation panel, and we are also having a lot of discussion about what is the future, what are the good sides and what are the bad sides of digital transformation, what are the risks of investment, and we were also talking about how important savings are, so that when investments in the new world are a bit risky, you can still have some reserves to get back to. I see Adam in the studio, so I will bring him up very soon, but before I do that, I just tell you again, don't forget, we have some games going on, so you can go to a page which is sponsored by the Giants and Titans. And on this page, you just have to enter your email address. And once you do that, then it takes you to different questions and you can answer all the questions. It's a quiz game. And at the end of the summit, you will be, if you play a lot, on the top of the leaderboard, and we will announce the winners on the 27th of November. Cannot believe that it's already 1 month that we are doing this. So this is the fourth weekend and 1 weekend to go. Make sure you are playing, make sure you are engaging, and make sure that you are connecting with the speakers. At the end, that's the whole goal of it. We are empowering you so that you can empower others. So slowly I'm bringing up Adam. It's evening for him, so I will wake him up. And it's morning for me, so he will wake me up too. Let's go. Hi, Adam.
That's right. Hey, how are you doing, Andrea?
I'm good. And how are you?
doing well, thank you. And I'm definitely wide awake.
That's good. So before we start the conversation, and we are jumping right into this, so
Right.
How is your weekend? What is your plan? Let's start with some casual topics before we
Sure. So I've, for probably about 90 days, I've been flying across Europe and also different parts of the US, speaking at various blockchain and Web3 conferences. So I've been back in the United States for probably like past 2 days. So I'm still kind of, I'm at kind of the end of getting over the jet lag, but I do miss all the great food I certainly got to enjoy. So yeah, it's so I'm back, and I'm also going to be putting out more episodes for my platform soon with, various interviews, thought leaders, innovators, engineers from the platform, and pick up from kind of where we last left off.
So nice. And we started with an interview together at your podcast, and that's also
Yes.
one of the topics that we will talk about today.
Excellent.
But, let's just start with you. Like, introduce yourself. Who is Adam, and what's your purpose?
Sure. So my name is Adam Christopher English. I'm the founder and host of Crypto with English. I've been in this space now for a little over 2.5 years. And what I usually do throughout my day is, at least with this project anyway, is that for the episode, I invite a different specialist, subject matter expert, or entrepreneur to come onto the show and effectively, in plain English, explain what their project is, and also in plain English, explain and articulate what they think is going to happen next. And this is with the goal and the desire in mind to eventually create a mass message that would lead towards mass adoption for a lot of this technology. And part of the problem is, in my professional opinion, most of the time, this subject matter is not explained very well. And, with the right type of questions, preparation and research, and of course, having a very well-informed guest, you could cover almost 68 hours of reading, within a 45-minute, hour and 15-minute episode. So, I did this with the point in mind to make this as easy as possible for the casual listener, but also make it very substantial and meaningful, where you're going to catch very, you could say nuanced and, special bits of information that is explained in a very easy way. So, people don't have to trouble themselves, just for hours on end, just to understand the jargon. So, It's been a very, very interesting ride. And of course, it's reached a certain level of success, and I'm being a little modest about it, and it's continuing to do so. So something that started off as an experiment on my part, it more or less took a life of its own, and it's brought me to some incredible places. So I'm still enjoying the ride, to say the least.
And being modest is just like little modest, because you have
A
to
little
tell
bit.
us where were you speaking, because you had
Oh, yes. Right. So I guess if I was to work backwards, so I was speaking at a conference called Democracy for All, D4A, and this is based in Barcelona, Spain, and it was held at this building called the La Llotja. So this was essentially a building probably about 300 to 400 years old, with a lot of historical significance, and in fact, it very much looks like a medieval castle. So knowing myself and how much of a history nerd I am, I automatically knew I was going to have a great time. And effectively, you could say the overall theme of that conference was, how is decentralized technology in the form of blockchain going to facilitate, you could say, the broadening and the empowerment of individuals across the planet. Right now, it's 2022. We are in a very, very unique, chaotic, and a very uncertain period of time where even the traditional institutions are really no longer trusted by many. And this is apparent in the United States. It's clear in the United States, and also many other places as well. And one of the central tenets of, you could say, blockchain technology is the absence of a third party or a middle person, to, you could say, manage your information and assets. Where this is kind of almost a breakaway from the way business was traditionally done. So at this conference, there was various, you could say, entrepreneurs and experts talking about how blockchain technology is going to scale and transform in the individual's rights, and also how they're going to essentially make find their place in the world, and do so in a very reasonable way where other people's rights are not infringed upon either. So it was a very, very deep, it was a very, very interesting 2 days to get into some of the rabbit holes regarding what is that future going to look like? Because I don't think many people have a very clear idea. And by the way, myself included, as far as what that future is going to look like, especially in light of, world events and whatnot. So, considering the fact that traditional infrastructures across the United States and many other areas of the world are eroding, and also people's perception of those infrastructures are eroding as well, there is a place for, you could say, decentralized technologies to perhaps fill in some of those gaps at the very least when it comes to services, when it comes to housing, when it comes to banking and things like that. And we're starting to see a lot of that. Well, for better or for worse, we are seeing how blockchain technology is changing society to more or less meet those needs. So, and inevitably, there is going to be a crossroads between governance rather, and technology. Is this going to be a tug of war? Is this going to be something else? And nobody exactly knows at this point. And I will say too, with the huge, you could say, array of crashes, incidents, and scandals within blockchain this year, and of course, most recently, FTX, the prospect of having a very, very hard, you could say, government regulatory scheme and initiative to, you could say, moderate and manage the industry, that is going to be a near certainty within the next 1 to 3 years going forward, with the malfeasance of bad actors. So there's a lot of things going on, and with my platform, we get into all these and we explain this in a very easy listening kind of way. And in fact, when I would first talk about this, I would say this is something you can listen to in your car on your way to work, when you're getting up in the morning and having your first cup of coffee, or when you're getting ready for bed. And that is the, you could say, the guiding light, or the compass that I've been using ever since. Because at the end of the day, it's going to matter whether non-interested, average, people on the street get interested. It's good that, let's say, people like me or yourself are interested in it, but the real success is going to be, it's going to be your non-blockchain coworker. It's going to be your neighbors. It's going to be your relatives. It's going to be, the baristas. It's going to be the people who are kind of already in your ecosystem that kind of that more or less make up the public, but who are not otherwise either interested or knowledgeable, at least yet anyway. So one of the things I noticed when it came to media, when it came to podcasts, is that sometimes the subject matter was a little too over the top. It would kind of just overload people with just graphics and effects. So you're not going to walk away with too much in that instance. And then on the other hand, I saw types of content, they were just too academic for a person, and even myself included, to just sit down and listen to. Nobody wants to necessarily feel like they're in the middle of a lecture, but nobody wants to be bored, and nobody wants to be overstimulated either. So these were the principles I had in mind when eventually putting all of this together. And ultimately the goal is to explain this and simplify this in the best way possible.
I love the inclusion approach because that's where it starts, to include everyone. And we were talking about something that I think I can discuss with you, because we are both like challenging things in the world.
Sure.
And I think that will be a nice discussion. So we were talking about the contrast between decentralization and also exclusion, because half of the world is still not on internet, and we are promoting something that some people just don't have access to. And how can we balance this out, and how can we make sure, or the government or someone, that those people who are excluded because of technical issues or technology, how can they be part of the game and catch up?
Right. And I would say this, that's a very good question. And I would answer that I don't entirely know just yet. So, to kind of add a little bit of color and context to this, many parts of the world are still unbanked, and that even includes the United States. So whether this is in North America, Europe, Latin America, Asia, Africa, there's large overlooked populations of people who don't have access to banks. And many of those banks, not always, but many of them do tend to be centered around metropolitan areas, more so than not. When it comes to, let's say more distant, more rural areas, it becomes a much different situation where people have to go miles and miles, to, let's say, cash a check, deposit a check. That is something where, on one hand, it's very, very present, but it's also the elephant in the room, because I don't see a lot of leadership directly address that. It's addressed in blockchain and decentralized technologies and people who otherwise are interested or work in the space. But I almost feel like at times, and this could be for any system, any government, I feel like a lot of times this is not addressed because they don't know either. So I would like to think that Web3 blockchain technologies would be a magic bullet to enable otherwise unbanked people with little to no access to even the internet to, participate in this system and, grow and prosper and have that sense of, and that ability of upward mobility. But I think with the way things are right now, there's not a lot of either practical solutions or articulated ones. And in fact, some of these things are just kind of out of control. I mean, like I said, much of the banking industries tend to be centered around metropolitan areas. Like, unless I think there's a financial incentive for a lot of those parties to go out to more remote areas, I don't see how you could say that the system, the way it currently is going to make banking, or you could say people who lack the access, I don't think it's going to make it for an easier time for them. And I think, to the Web3 blockchain space's credit, this industry does directly address that and grapples with it and attempts to build solutions through decentralized applications and tokens and whatnot. So I could say this, I don't know what the solution is, but I do say this, the solution will come from Web3 and blockchain. And they already have a huge head start just by addressing it, but also for the past few years, there's many projects and applications coming out to resolve that very issue. So, I think there's going to be some promising, you can almost say dark horse kind of startup that's probably going to create it. And, that's something to celebrate.
I think that's interesting. I just pulled up some data from Data Portal. So it says that
Okay.
5.07 million people around the world use internet today, which is only 63% of the world's population.
Right.
But it has been growing with 170 million in the last 12 months to October 2022.
Right.
So the number is growing, but still it's half of the population almost. So it's a little
Right.
bit more than the half. That means that we can talk about metaverse, we can talk and go into this space, we can talk about Bitcoin, we can talk about
Right.
cryptocurrencies and blockchain, but these people don't even have access to basic internet. That means that there is no knowledge, there is no access, there is no possibility for them to just plug into this society.
Right. And, to be honest, I don't see some sort of bill or law or legislature being passed anytime soon that's going to, put you could say a smartphone in every person's hand. In fact, listen, in today's day and age, you absolutely need a smartphone to survive and navigate and coexist with everything now. Much of our daily lives and our immediate ecosystem are very much guided by technology and the apps that enable and catalyze those things. So I think if it comes to a cheap and easy way to access the internet, having cheap and easy and efficient smartphones, I think the odds favor the creative, ambitious, you could almost say semi-volatile or semi-reckless startup, because I think if we're to wait on traditional infrastructures as they are, there's not going to be a bailout for the people who are disconnected and totally separated from that type of access. So I am very bullish as far as the underlying technology in this space. I do think it will provide a lot of dynamic, very creative, out-of-the-box solutions for society. Unfortunately, because of, you could say, both world events and just the practicalities of reality, for those people who are already suffering, it certainly feels like it's not moving fast enough. So, there is that. And one of the traditional problems of blockchain technology is its very, very intense and voluminous consumption of electricity, which is very damaging upon the environment. Now, granted, there's been different blockchains and platforms and dApps and whatever else that have mitigated and have reduced, you could say, that large energy demand, which is very good. But to get the other half of the world hooked into this, it's going to take another few years. And, I'd like it to happen sooner. There's a whole world of people out there who could otherwise be participating in the economy as consumers, as customers, as participants, as future entrepreneurs, who can't because of because of the circumstances they're in. And that's not fair. And I'd like to think in 2022 that a lot of those historical problems and catastrophes and things like that, would have been resolved. At least if I was just to go by like science fiction movies, like, many of them kind of portray a future where, like, well, at least the ones that are not dystopian, but a lot of you could say the more positive themed science fiction movies, they almost present a future where, there's no issues as far as access to water or access to food or access to technology. So as a kid watching some of that stuff, I'm like, I just kind of assumed that was going to happen. And as we are in 2022 right now, we are still very, very far from the mark. And like I said, it's not happening fast enough. I do think it will happen, but there is going to be a significant waiting game, unfortunately.
I think, that's a general universal responsibility, and maybe the solution, maybe those startups that you are saying that you are coming on board instead of the government, because it's all about decentralization. It's all about open programming. It's all about finding resources and finding things that can solve this problem. And I hope that it will come, because there is many good things in this technology, but also you can see the power game, like how the governments
Right.
are taking it over, and how the governments, they want to do their own. And once they do their own and you are plugged into it, then it's very hard to get out, because they will know everything. And it's like kind of a very weird power game going on between decentralized
Yeah,
and centralized players, right?
there is. And there's going to be a little bit of this tug of war power struggle for quite a while too, because one of the main issues is that because of its inherent decentralized nature, so instead of having like a centralized server or a location for all the data, every single participant, you could say, within the wider network has the same exact information or ledger as the other person. So, that provides both a lot of promise and a lot of problems. The ultimate metric is going to be, can government and technology somehow strike a balance where the government can still protect people, the overall, you could say, health and morals of society, so people don't get exploited. I mean, listen, as great as blockchain is, plenty of criminals still use it. That's an undeniable,
Exactly.
fact. So,
and things like FTX can happen. So there is not
and things like
bit of
FTX.
regulation missing. No one is checking, right?
Right. And this is why you also need a government regulator when it comes to that, because if you don't, you're going to have an FTX almost every other day. If people know they can get away with it, they're certainly going to keep doing it. So the ultimate metric of success is going to be, can society have, and can society moderate that balance between government and tech, where people are protected, however, they still get to enjoy as much of their rights as they reasonably can. And that's more or less, in my opinion, the $1 million question, because I don't think we've hit that balance now. I don't know when we will, but it's at least going to be a few years before something in the right direction, manifests from that. So, like I said, this is a very interesting time in history to be living in.
It's interesting. I mean, no one knows what's happening. That's what we were talking
Right.
about. Like, no one in the world knows where it's going and what it will be. We know what
Right.
it is today. We can experience metaverse in a very basic ways. It's really like at the beginning, like those games that we started to play with, and then you enter, and then you are like, oh wow, where am I? Is it Donkey Kong?
Right. Oh yeah, like Donkey Kong, right?
And then maybe it will develop very fast because it's accelerating so fast. So,
right.
But no one knows. And you are in this environment for a long time. You met so many people, you interviewed so many people. So what are the boldest ideas out there that are already existing? Or tell us a few practical things that you saw from crazy people that you interviewed.
Well, I will say some of the good ideas I've encountered are not really tokens. Now, more often than not, when people explore this space or they're starting to become interested in this space, more often than not, and for better or for worse, the focus tends to be on tokens themselves. So there is a trend where I think anybody who's a startup and they're trying to create another crypto coin, they're more or less trying to build the next Bitcoin or something to be the successor to Bitcoin. And listen, and I'm sure if I was in a room full of them right now, I'm gonna hear different arguments. Oh, well, it's a utility token. It's actually not digital money. It's meant for, something else. But, at the end of the day, each of these coins do have a fiat value to them. And I think anybody who creates a coin wants it to go as high as possible. So I think just by virtue of creating a coin in the first place, you're already oriented in that direction to either be inspired or compete against a Bitcoin. That's my feeling. And when it comes to my show, I mostly have people who are creating dApps, people who are creating other different types of projects purely from the blockchain technology, point of view. So in fact, my show is hardly even coin centric. And, certainly I would not want to be in a position where I either appear to be or accidentally be giving out, financial advice, because I'm not a financial advisor. And because this is probably one of the most volatile markets in history. Listen, you can have one good day with Bitcoin and you can have a terrible one the next day. We're already seeing a lot of that, and that's not going to stop anytime soon. So I think part of the after effect of my show is to take a little bit of the focus away from just coins in general and really articulate the underlying technology. And I'll answer your question in a moment. So some of the best projects that I've seen on my show are projects that, let's say, sought to create solutions for supply chain issues, which we've experienced and still are experiencing across the world. And also, you could say the management of people's personal data within, a hospital healthcare system. So there's a lot of issues in society between, first off, supply chains not being able to adapt or pivot when certain, geopolitical events happen. And then you have food shortages. And then when it comes to hospitals, and you could say medical data in the healthcare industry in general, there is no centralized uniform, or not even just centralized, but there is no streamlined processed, you could say, conduit where anybody can access their medical records at any time, wherever they are. So, whether you're in the United States or elsewhere, anytime you see a physician and then you start seeing specialists and then you start seeing, nurses and other staff, a lot of information gets lost within that exchange. I'm not saying it always does, but listen, if these are, if this is a medical context, some of those small details could be the difference between life and death. So because the way, you could say the system is currently, many people are still keeping medical records in traditional file cabinets. So, unless you have a highly organized and a highly diligent person in every medical office, there's always going to be, very probable, you could say chances of error. Anytime you see a physician, like let's say hypothetically I go on vacation, let's say I get myself hurt, I break my leg, I see a physician, and then I start seeing like 2 to 3 specialists after that. But the thing is, how efficiently do those offices communicate with each other? Are they actually sharing notes? Are they coordinating these visits in a very timely, organized way? And there is no place that exists, from a technological point of view, where you can access your information in its totality immediately. So any doctor, nurse, or medical personnel you see, you can give them everything at once. No, when you're seeing these people, often they're almost starting from scratch. Of course, they may have access to medical records from other offices, but a lot of times, they also need to do their own due diligence. So they're starting from scratch and they're asking kind of a lot of the, traditional rudimentary questions. But, these things, other than the fact that information gets lost, but a lot of time gets lost in the process too. And time is money. And, if there is, you could say, a hospital system that's on a blockchain where across, you could say, hundreds, if not thousands of nodes, if you're a participant of that system, at any given time, your information is there and it can't be changed. And anytime there's, let's say, a block added, or anytime new data comes in there, it's permanently recorded. So if there's even situations where people are tampering with medical records, you can't go back and, you could say, change what has already been, you could say, added to the block. So that is one of the unique features, that generally speaking, blockchains are immutable, so they can't be changed. So anything literally from day 1 to day 600, you can see the entirety of all mistakes, all gaffes, all anything. Every little bit of code, every little bit of action on any single date. So having, let's say, medical records on some sort of blockchain, that's going to save lives. It's going to save a lot of money and time. It's also going to create higher quality medical research. If you have organized records across, various patients, it's easier if you're a medical professional to start noticing trends and patterns. So if you're a research scientist, you're not going to have to exhaust yourself, ruffling through file cabinets. If you can summon essentially this type of information through an app, near instantly, this is going to really improve many aspects. I mean, really the industry, the healthcare industry as a whole. So I would say between supply chains and healthcare, for me, I see a tremendous amount of potential and promise there. And one of the things with, you could say, the healthcare industry, one of the, you could say, ideals or one of the solutions proposed would be people having control over their own information, which has not really historically been done. Like, any one of us at any given time, we don't really have control over our information. In fact, it's usually kind of, one of the bigger, corporate entities that does. So one of the solutions to come out of this would be having sole control over your information at any given time. And if you want to disclose your information, that is solely your choice. So people don't just have access to your information just by virtue of, let's say, using Twitter, for instance. Not taking a knock at Twitter, but I mean, listen, the reality is what the reality is, so,
I mean, it's the same with all the social medias that
sure.
It's just like you are giving it, and for a long time people didn't know what they're giving, and then it's revealed that everything is given. So basically, that the privacy is not existing today, although we have these things, laws and protective things in place.
I mean, we have laws, but sometimes it could take years to pass a law, and technology changes before our eyes on a daily basis. So you can have, let's say, the greatest written piece of legislation protecting privacy rights of people, but then again, within that period of time, we're almost in, we're almost in a totally different, society at that point, technologically speaking. So there's a lot of work to be done. But yeah, just to reiterate, those two examples are projects of guests who've been on my show, and as kind of my first impression, it was obvious to me the value that could bring, even in the short term, if, let's say, these projects are adequately funded, the programming and the various aspects of it are done very well. I guess the question is right now is how fast or how slow is that change going to ultimately take? And even with things when it comes to supply chains, one of the things I would expect is I don't think a lot of governments are going to be particularly friendly towards it at first, because I think a lot of people are going to lose jobs in the process. You're going to say there's going to be a lot of, you could say, government personnel who've been doing some of those jobs for a long time. They are going to be losing their jobs once those solutions are introduced. So, there's going to be a little bit of blowback, regarding that. And, there's also a lot of, I think, commercial interests that want to keep things the way they are, despite, let's say, despite, let's say, what, the amount of hardship going on. So it's going to be an uphill battle regardless. But, eventually, listen, whatever is the status quo out there, it didn't stop the emergence of the internet. There were, I would imagine, during the Web 2 era, there was a lot of, you could say, businesses that probably would be harmed by, mass access and consumerism through the internet. But, listen, it still came anyway. We have the Amazons of the world. We have many projects where these solutions are part of our everyday lives. So I think there's going to be resistance no matter what, but it's not going to ultimately stop technology moving forward. I think at some point the technology becomes so big, you can't reasonably stop it, even if you're an institution. You just can't. People are, it's kind of like in Web 2 before the internet really took off, and then everybody had access to like Wi-Fi and cable and DSL and stuff like that. But when everybody has that moment where they get it, then I don't think, any type of entity can really stop it. So I think when blockchain reaches that point where all of a sudden people get it, then I think it's too late for a lot of, you could say, adversarial entities out there to really stop it. So it's going to be an interesting road ahead, to say the least.
Yeah, it's a rocky road. I think it's all about patience and waiting out and being there at the right moment, and then a lot of things to learn about. We always say that everything here is so fluid now, so it's so good to read about it, to listen to people who are credible, and to try to find the good sources for all the information out there, and to avoid scams, because that's also something I don't want to always talk about the negatives, but that's good to mention that there are so many scams out there. And then what is happening right now, it only can be solved by doing the work, by doing the research as an individual and learning more about it, so that you can recognize the patterns, right?
Yeah, and to the detriment of, let's say, the Web3 blockchain industry, Unfortunately, one of the reputations it's gained was the tendency to either encourage or create kind of these rug pull scam coin scenarios where people, lose money. Like, I can imagine with like crypto punks, like how many doppelgangers and copycats came out of that? Hundreds. Same with a lot of those other, NFT projects as well. And at any given point, there has to be at least over 50,000 like coins alone, just in raw regular circulation, and that doesn't even factor in things that haven't been launched on an exchange or whatnot. I think that is going to be a hurdle for the blockchain industry to get over, because so many people have been damaged, by projects where, listen, you buy this NFT, you're going to become rich. You buy this coin, you're going to be rich. They're a dime a dozen, and they're almost everywhere. And I think for now, in the foreseeable future, what it looks like this, the truly valuable crypto tokens, as one can put it, because they're still here, they've proven themselves. Many of these projects, they come and go weeks, months, and then they disappear because they're scams. So everybody does, I would say anybody should do their research, but in fairness to, let's say, everybody, doing your research isn't exactly very easy, because this is a very new thing at the end of the day as well. And I do think there's a lot of well-intentioned people out there, but people are not necessarily going to remember the successes, and the problems always get attention. There's never a lack of that. So that is going to be a hurdle, if you will, that this industry is going to have to learn how to resolve. Because if you talk to the average person in the street who, let's say, isn't participating in this space, you will find people who will still say that. Is that a scam? It's like fake money. It's like a digital coin or something like that. And even though, let's say, on the surface, it feels like what they're saying is wrong, but their impression is absolutely correct, because that's a barometer of how many people are perceiving it. And I'm not saying that imputes to blockchain technology, but if you want to talk about coins, I think that is ultimately going to be a much harder sell for a lot of people. And by the way, as somebody who's been in this space for, at least as far as the scope of, how mainstream the space is, who's been here for a while, I would not feel comfortable just, jumping all in with a coin. And I think personally that would be the right position to take. I think we still, in many ways, have to wait and see with a lot of this stuff. And I do think I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist, not by any degree. However, there is a tendency, whether it's conscious or unconscious, to create the next one. So the problem is that there is only one Bitcoin, and the way it was designed and programmed, it was done very, very well. And if you try to create a copycat now, the market is going to kick you out. Because one of the things that very much powers a lot of these Web3 blockchain crypto projects are the social media communities behind them. And that's and that's a very, very new feature that didn't exist really until now. So if you're creating a project, you absolutely have to have a Twitter account. Twitter, Instagram, Discord. You have to be on a variety of platforms, because any successful project, it seems, in this space has a very vibrant, powerful community behind it. So, if I was to give you the example of Bitcoin, if somebody tried to come up with a copycat of Bitcoin, I don't think it's going to last very long. And, in fact, members of, let's say, the Bitcoin community are going to lash out at those actors as well. So you can say in many ways those are some of the good aspects of social media, where, there are certain elements that keep other people honest. So.
And I think this community is so strong. I mean, the Bitcoin, how it has been created, the whole, I would say, who knows whether intentional or not intentional marketing behind it, making it as a big myth, who has been creating it, and then limiting it to the limited number of amount of Bitcoin that will be released in the future. And then all this scarcity and the community and the way how they think, and don't let anyone change the codes and to interrupt and change the system that they have created. It's kind of like a brilliant thing, right? How they put this all together.
Well, it is. It's and I'm not a programmer, at least professionally, but I have done some programming on Solidity making smart contracts. But it almost seems like a scientific miracle to even create something like Bitcoin in the first place, especially when it was done, many, many years ago. And granted, now that it's been on the scene and in fact, very much serves as a metric for the scene, many other projects have come about that. But, imagine yourself being the first person to not even just conceive it, but to build it. That is a very special thing, if not genius thing to do.
Yeah, this is amazing, and I think many more things are coming up, and not just in the coin space, not just in the blockchain, but also in other spaces like metaverse and Web3, and a lot of things are coming up, a lot of opportunities, and it can be very inclusive. So if we do it right, then it can give opportunities. We were talking with Manu Chagara about the way of abundance of opportunities. If we really want to see it, there is opportunity here, because every idea is created easily in this new space. You are the first player, so it's kind of easy, and there is so much inspiration around, right?
Yeah, there is. And I do think it's encouraging for many people to participate in this space, because I mean, very much so, the creativity is in many ways the currency. And in fact, I think in many ways, if one is trying to build something on a blockchain in a very bland, uninspired way, it's not going to go anywhere. I think people's standards for solutions are rising over time. So you can't just pass muster by being mediocre. Like, I think if you're to really stand out in this space, I think you have to be really good. So I would even say this: whatever passed for success in Web 2, any project, any team, I would say you're going to have to do way better in this space. You absolutely have to, because already there is a large amount of, you could say, healthy or even unfair skepticism towards the space, but also even within the space. You're not going to have every person crazy about coins and NFTs and stuff. And I think reasonable people can agree. There's plenty of arguments for and against. So, like I said, for those who rise to the top, you're going to have to be really good, and probably better than others at any other time, in history, at least the way it looks like right now.
Love it. Thank you so much for the shares and all your thoughts. I think it's so opening for anyone who is like listening to us, because I love personal opinions, personal perspectives, and you have been in this space for such a long time. The next question is, what's next for Adam, for the Crypto with English, for the podcast, for your travels, for your brand? I mean, where do you see yourself in 2023?
Well, we have a team. I have a COO, and right now we're in the process of putting rails on this. So what do I mean by that? So we are creating content that's monetized across different platforms. So if you want to essentially have access to you could say regular episodes, that's fine. But if you want, let's say, deep analysis on certain things, that is, you could say, a type of content that will be monetized. And, these are essentially going to be you could say, very deep, deep thoughts and very deep, you could almost say, estimations of how things are. Because the thing is, with the podcast itself, that's really about the guest. And you'll see on every episode I interview somebody, so I never talk about myself. In fact, I think a lot of times it's really the guests that made the show successful. I mean, I think I'm at least okay when it comes to asking questions. But over time, there has been a demand for people to know my thoughts, my personal thoughts and feelings on projects. And when I have people on the show, it's not really about me interjecting my opinion. And most people say I'm easy to talk to. So I think that's also part of the success too. But to be honest, there has been a demand for people to hear my own personal analysis and opinions about projects and current events. So, myself and my team, we found a demand based on, you could say, the first wave of success from this. So we're approaching about 100 episodes. I've had people from all across this industry, and it's kind of one of those things. the further you go along, the smaller it feels, because you always end up running into the same faces, and sometimes you end up working with some of these people as well. So the next thing is really going to be, putting on you could say, the monetizable content. And we also have a few other things, in the works as well, as far as, like upgrading the studio and doing some other, conference and you could say summit related things as well, because we have the audience and we have a very well-informed, very serious and professional audience. And that was the goal when I started out. Like, listen, I don't want any knuckleheads being fans of mine. Like, you see a lot of silly shit on Discord and Twitter. And, listen, even in like Web3 and Bitcoin, and, you see, like, you could say the trolls, and I don't want them. And whenever that issue comes up, I candidly talk about that. I do feel, and by the way, I'm not an expert, but I do feel this: if you're going to put yourself out there and talk about these things, I feel you do need to choose your audience. And I think you do need to have a good idea of what that audience is. I don't think it's a good idea to try to be everything to everyone. So, following my gut from there, it seems to have been working so far. So we're currently onboarding new people. We have a team. We're going to be upgrading to a newer, larger studio to do, you can say, more grander productions and whatnot. And we have a few other things in the work. So I would say, to put in one word, we are expanding. So, and we hope to continue that.
Love your honesty about the trolls. I'm feeling the same way. There's so much information out there, and it's making it harder for people to separate the good and the bad. And thanks to those people who you just named as knuckleheads or trolls, they are still there, and they are still scamming people and talking about their expertise, which is sometimes it's just not existing. So it's really can be a misleading world that we are living in, with all this freedom of information and not having something like it reminds me on these old movies about the old type of newspaper, how they were.
Sure.
The investigations that they put behind the case and all the research that they did before they released an article. And today everyone can just and then push the button and
right. Right. And, there's been a big drop in standards, and some of it is just kind of the direction of where society is going. I think also technology just makes it easier for anybody, for better or for worse, to have a voice, whether they should or shouldn't. And I will say where the industry is right now, it is still finding itself as far as who the experts are and who aren't. And, even just beyond trolls, you do have, you could say, wannabe influencers posing as tech entrepreneurs. This is a growing trend that I've noticed. And by the way, like, for anybody who wants to participate in this space, you don't have to be a knowledgeable know-how about everything. But I do think this: if you're going to participate in any space, I think you need to be clear with your intentions. Because I think otherwise, if you're not, it's eventually going to, backfire. And I will say, a lot of these conferences are great, but I will say, at some of these conferences, some of the trolls do get in, and some of those trolls are speakers, and I see it, And I'm not going to name names, but I don't think this is necessarily going to stop unless there's more pushback, so to say, because it's very easy in this day and age. Like, okay, you have an idea for an NFT, and this isn't knocking anybody. This is actually directed towards the bad actors, but you can essentially go on an OpenSea and start just creating things, and then just kind of call yourself an entrepreneur and thought leader. Now, by the way, I'm not saying simply creating things doesn't mean you're not doing anything, but I do feel that people need to be very, very clear and accurate as far as how they describe their participation in this space. So, for me, I kind of joke about this. Like, I'm kind of a guy who's good at test taking in this space because, I do have a lot of certifications, and I'm a guy who has a podcast. So, and I think that I'm also good at explaining things, but I don't advocate or state it as per se something grander than it actually is. I am a subject matter expert, but I wouldn't say I'm some sort of industry thought leader that's guiding the industry as a whole and things like that. I mean, I think to get to those levels, it's going to take many, many years and a lot of experience, a lot of failures, a lot of you could say life experience to get there. So, there's almost, you could say, a very wide array of trolling that goes on, and some of it is the very obvious stuff where you see the very, you could say, inflammatory comments. But some of the subtle stuff I think is actually the more dangerous ones, because if those kind of actors position themselves as thought leaders, then there's not really a mechanism of keeping those people honest, at least not at this point in time. So I think the industry is still kind of finding its voice and finding or figuring out who the authorities are and who aren't. And I will say this, noticeably, it has been getting better over time. And it has been getting better, across, conferences where I do think, because there's more information and there's more, you could say, maturity as far as the context of what this is, and also, who the people are, there has been a better, you could almost say, filtration system as far as, removing those trolls so they don't have, let's say, a microphone on stage, and getting more, credible voices in there. So, it's a work in progress, and, like anything great, it's a work in progress. So I am very optimistic as far as how that will go. And of course, one could always wish it could happen, faster. But, more often than not in real life, the bad examples speak louder than the good examples. We can see that. We can see that in anything. So, I, before I got into this space, I made sure I knew exactly what I was talking about. By the way, it's okay to be wrong. We're all wrong. We all either misstate or misquote something. But I do think this, and it doesn't have to be in the form of a certification, but I do think if you're going to participate in any space, even out of respect to the participants and, you could say, the art or the craft, make sure you know what you're doing, or at least start, learning those fundamentals before you throw yourself in there. Because, listen, it's one thing if you just embarrass yourself and, you fail, but the problem is that for newer people or newer participants coming in, they're not going to know who the experts and who the phonies are. So you're going to have a lot of people taking on the bad example of, you could say, those bad actors. And that creates more problems too. And listen, we're all humans. We only have so much time in the day, so, it's not easy necessarily or convenient to be able to catch and spot a lot of those, you could say, bad trends. Because, listen, life happens to us all. And, we all have to eat. We all have to sleep. We all have to have a life, So, we can't, spend 24/7 being like a watchdog or something. But, as a professional in this space, I do think it's my duty to at least point these things out, for people who want to get interested. But, even for the industry as a whole, so far I have acquired a, you could say, a solid, substantial, you could say, platform and, you could say, viewer base. So, if I'm to serve it best, then I have to be honest in what I see. So, I would say trolling, whether it's the Twitter trolls or, you could say, the fake thought leaders, those could be some of the most insidious, you could say, forces that would undermine any type of meaningful, productive, dialogue as far as explaining a lot of this. So it's like I said, it's a long road, and I'm glad you've noticed that too. When it comes to trolls, I will say this: if there's going to be any type of mainstream coverage of a lot of these things within Web3, it's almost always going to be the bad examples. It's not going to be the team that created this super innovative app on a shoestring budget, or somebody that created this awesome metaverse interface. It's going to be some troll saying something incendiary, and then people somehow lost money in the process, and then you have a lot of angry people. You could say having this little melee on social media back and forth. And the thing is, out of any other industry in existence, crypto, blockchain, and social media, they can't exist in isolation. In fact, one feeds the other. It's almost symbiotic. Like, if you want any project to thrive in blockchain, you need to have a social media presence. However, you can just as easily be taken down by that, that same presence as well. So a lot of the struggle is going to be, how do you effectively navigate that world without kind of, shooting yourself in the foot? Because, there's always going to be opportunities for failure, and, there's always going to be kind of trouble around the corner if you're not careful. So a lot of these things that, you and I are talking about today, and of course I, fondly remember when you came onto my show many months ago, part of it is to, unpack and explain these things in an easy way so people don't have to waste their time in the middle of the day trying to figure this out without any guidance. So, that's the name of the game.
Well, that's the honesty, and I think we can continue to, put people in the foreground who are trusted, who are vetted, who we already got to know for a longer time, and we can try our part to be responsible, but can also call out people out there. Be responsible with these guys. As an individual who is joining this space, you make your research, you ask people who are in this space who you trust, and those people who are the trolls, please take into consideration that you are misleading people, and then that how it will affect you or how it will affect the society. So just let's wake up this common general responsibility, universal responsibility of people.
Right. And I would say this, and by the way, I think you remember this, but before I had any guests come on, I always had a prep call, weeks ahead of time, because, you want to make sure that you can have a meaningful conversation that people can learn from. Because otherwise, if this is somebody you don't have good chemistry with, what's going to end up speaking for that episode or that platform is going to be the fights. It's not going to be the information. So for me, and I would actually just suggest this as a practical matter, if anybody's looking to do some sort of tech live stream or, tech podcast in this space, always get to know your guests before they come on. And I know it sounds like a very simple bit of rhetoric, but, I have seen it where people almost, have people on where they've never met. And there's a problem. You're kind of rolling the dice, especially if it's somebody you don't know. And for me, I always have a prep call before I have any guest on, to kind of put them at ease. A fair amount of people are nervous. And by the way, if there's a large audience, even if it's on the internet, that still adds a level of anxiety. But also it's a good gauge for me as far as, can I bring this person on and can I make this informative? And more often than not, it's yes.
We have to keep that right to ourselves that we can say no. I mean, we can say the example of this summit, like I do interview with all the speakers. Even
and you do this too, yes.
Or 130, doesn't matter. I do that before the summit. And then the lives, because everything is live, I really have to make sure that things are valid and it's going out of the right way. So thank you, Adam. It has been again an intriguing and thought-provoking conversation. I see Nigesh already in the studio, so I will bring him up very soon.
Awesome. Andrea, it was an absolute pleasure.
1 hour is just flying away again with you.
I know, right? We make it fun here.
Yes, thank you so much, Adam. I wish you all the best and success. And before you leave, just tell the audience, where can they reach you? Where can they listen to your podcast so that they can?
Sure. And to our, into our lovely and energetic audience, you can find my show Crypto with English on Spotify. You can find it on YouTube. You can find it on Apple Podcasts. You can also find it on LinkedIn Live as well. So all you have to do is send me an invite and add me. And any episode that I do, I stream it from there as well. And also Twitter. So I would say this, across the board, on almost any social media platform, you'll find me and you'll find the show. And you'll find probably what you're looking for. And if you don't, just send me a message and I'll make sure it's there.
Thank you so much, Adam. Have a nice rest and recover from your jet lag, and then have an amazing sleep. And wish you a beautiful weekend.
Thank you very much, Andrea. It was an absolute pleasure. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Adam. We talk soon. Bye-bye.
We'll talk soon. Bye.
All right, switching speakers. This is the morning of the second day of the fourth weekend of the Global Empowerment Summit, and Nigesh is already in the studio. He will be continuing our regular weekend talks on his most important topics. And today it's really connecting to what we were talking about with Adam. It's value-driven transformation, which is kind of like what we were talking about just right now, that we have to make sure that the transformation that we bring into other people's lives is value-driven. And it's not about earning more money, and it's not about the fame. It's not about the hype. It's about bringing value into people's lives. So let me bring up Nigesh and let me greet him. And hi, Nigesh. How are you today?
I'm good, Andrea. I'm sorry about last week. It just got to me, but I think it's pertinent with this topic today. And I hope you are doing well. I can see the the whole summit, everything on your face right now. I hope you're getting enough rest.
It's so much information, it's just, I'm telling it to everyone that every year I'm doing this, I have like a brain explosion because the ideas, amount of information that I have to digest and put it in a form, and also connect this information week by week and summarize and to bring it in front of people, well, that's a brain work. So I most probably I will be a zombie in December, but I will enjoy being a zombie, and in January I come back with all the ideas already in the system. So
A
it's a
good
good
December
way.
Christmas break that you're gonna have.
Exactly. Using it for strategizing for 2023.
Mhm.
How have you been, Nigesh? How is everything? How was your week? Your last
Um,
week?
Well, I have to say it's been actually a rather challenging month because of a few things work-wise and business-wise that's been happening. But like I say, any challenging situation is always something that teaches you to be better in the future. So I'm taking it as that, as some things were rather painful, but again, I think that once I had enough time to process it and I know where it comes from, what I can do about it, and how I can move into the future with it, I think that's where, again, the topic, right? That's where it creates value for both myself and the people who I'm going to interact with. And also to all Malaysians out there who's taking some time to listen, because I know today is an important day in Malaysia. It's
Yes.
election day in Malaysia, so I'm gonna go out and do cast my vote right after this.
Oh, yes,
But
your
to
finger
all,
is not purple
not
yet.
yet, not yet, not yet. Right after this, thankfully, it's just walking distance from my place, so I'm just gonna go and do that after this. So to all Malaysians who are tuning in, even though it's such an important day, thank you. But also make sure you cast your vote. That's your responsibility and that's your right.
Well, thank you so much, and I believe that's an important time in every country's life when again the future is coming into picture, and what will help and what will happen. Because
Mhm.
yeah, let's just say, yeah,
Indeed.
it can
It just happened
anything
in the
can
United
happen.
States. It's happening here now.
Exactly. So looking forward to that. Hopefully it will point out into a better future, and into growth, and the development and value driven life. So let's
Hmm.
do that. And about your topic, value driven transformations, why do you think it's so important? Why did you want it to spend this 25 minutes with this topic? What is your take on this?
Okay, so I think it's kind of curious that I kind of got a very good setup. International Men Day. Oh, right. I didn't know that. Now I know.
Let's celebrate Nigesh and all the men out there. And
Okay.
Achan also for the comment.
Right. I think it's kind of interesting that I was going to speak about this today, and we got the kind of setup that we did for what has been happening, especially in this past 2 weeks. I think those are following the news. We just had, I think it was Adam, right, who was just talking about
Yes.
crypto, and that was a very, very, very important news that came out throughout this week and last week about FTX and what happened
Yes.
over there. And then at the same time, we're also seeing a lot of these tech companies, the amount of layoffs that are happening in tech companies. Well, some of them is predictable, like
Mhm.
example Microsoft and all that, because it's part of the cycle to kind of rejuvenate and get new blood in. But some are very, very concerning. And when I look at the lens of that, and being where I am, I also lead a tech business. So how we go out and create something needs to and always be anchored on this term called value. And value here is not a dollar sign. And
Mm.
that's an important thing. It's not a dollar sign. Value here is a very broad word. Um, I know, like, I think last week I was supposed to talk about ownership, but I didn't get a chance to. But my take on that is ownership also drives value, and you have to be value driven, meaning when you create something, you're always thinking, how can this either help, change, or transform people's lives? And it needs to be there to solve a problem. It's not there for your gain only. It needs
Mm.
to be there to solve a problem, because it's kind of a virtuous cycle if you look at it. If you are solving people's problems, then you gain as well. If you're selling a product that's going to help somebody do something really different and really fulfill something in their lives, therefore then they would want to take or get your product or get your services, and then therefore you gain out of it. And as long as we think in those terms, like, what value am I now creating for society, it anchors a person really well, because then you're not thinking of, okay, how much profit margins am I going to make? How can I nickel and dime people? How can I convince this investor to pour so much money into me that it just goes into a black hole? I think when you look at the lens of what's happening right now, I call this, like, people say there's going to be a bad recession coming next year. Um, I like to change that framing, and I think it's important. Framing is always an important thing for me as well. I think it's the great correction that is probably going to happen, and I'm hopeful for that. I'm really hopeful for that.
Don't print anymore. We don't accept
Yeah,
more printing.
exactly. And it's important because, sure, we are human beings. We get excited, right? Especially, and to be honest, we are also very selfish in nature, because we're always thinking, okay, what can I do to make myself feel better? What can I do to improve my state of life? So we always go out thinking that way, and we get excited when we see something that can immediately do that for us. And so happens that our lives are determined by how much we have in the bank, and how much can we spend, and how can we create this wonderful living life and holidays and all that kind of thing. So when we think in those terms, then we go chasing the dollar sign. But when we go chasing the dollar sign, what then starts happening is you forget, what exactly are you doing to create value? So, in example, let's look at it from a few different lenses. If you are a person who's a high net value person, right, and you have a lot of money to spend, and you say, like, hey, look, I want to invest my money in something, right? If you just purely think about yourself and go follow what is said as common wisdom of investment, which is find something which can multiply your money 10x. Okay, so once you multiply your money 10x, even that cycle of doing it, all you're doing is multiplying your money 10x, and you're thinking of, how can I grow this, or how can I get this as fast as possible? You're not thinking of the value that it's going to actually add to society. You're just thinking of how fast you can grow. And that's at the expense of, one, the company that you've invested the money to. Because think of what's going to happen. If you're an investor, you may not be the person directly doing it. You may go through a fund, and that fund would manage it for you. And the fund is going to talk to other people, or going to talk to this company. And what is the fund going to say? Hey, look, we've got this bunch of investors. They're putting money into you. The expectation is for you to 10x their money in X amount of time. So go do that. No matter how, I don't care. Go do that. What's going to happen? The company's incentive is now not to add value to society. The company's incentive is to 10x the money. How does that help anybody? It helps a few people, sure, but how does that help society? And in the end of the day, that company is going to be very unsustainable. And for those who have been following the Twitter news, that's exactly what happened to Twitter. It is people pouring in money with very little, if I would say, very little real world value being added to people, and money just going into the drain sink. And what ends up happening at the end is, look at the number of people who are losing their jobs. So this is a story that we've seen happen so many places. Worse still, this whole story of FTX. Look at how many people lost money that they invested in, all because they were chasing 10x, and they're incentivizing the other person on the other end who's running the company to just 10x the money, no matter how. What's the real world value? Did it change society? Did it make people's lives better? Did it stop inflation? None of that. So this is why when you create something, if you're going to be an entrepreneur out there, or even if you're in an organization out there, or even if you're in school, think about the value that you can create when you do something. Because trust me on this one, it's a virtuous cycle. You create value, you get back returns. Sure, it's not going to be world, like billions of dollars kind of return, but who needs that? Honestly, who needs that? What you need is, you're happy in your life, you're comfortable, you can provide for yourself, you can provide for your family, and at the point where you decide that you like to take a break, you can take a break. If we all can just live with that, and that makes life a lot more intentional, then you start thinking, okay, I'm just going to add value to people. I get enough of what I need. But that happiness and that fulfillment that you get, that you have now helped not just one person, but many people out there, because you're thinking of the value that whatever you're creating is going to do. That's life changing for me.
I think we are touching something very philosophical. It's almost about my economist side is coming up. It's about saying that capitalism is that it's just not working anymore because it's pushing people to real bubbles, running after the money, and instead of doing the real work on a smaller scale and having real impact in people's life and really selling those things or making a real commerce and something that is really happening, like in reality. We are creating all this imaginary situation that, oh, I have like 1,000,000 followers and hundreds of them are not real, or I have like 100,000 likes and then 2 of them is my friends and then the rest is just someone I bought to click on my posts. Or it's the same when you create amazing amount of goods and it's coming to the market and no one is buying it because it's just, you don't need that, or people are buying everything on platforms like Lazada and Amazon and all this, and it all ends up on a shelf because you never use it. So for me, it's kind of like, okay, capitalism was good, it was working for a while, but coming back to something like a new socialism or something that is, bringing more the society and the circular economy and the good things and the impact into the middle. It's here, it's in the verge, and I feel that this will happen. We need to do something. Some new thing has to come out of it, a new way of society working, right?
I mean, I think it's a yes and no, because it's whenever something or some process is created. So I consider capitalism as an economic process, right? When a process is created, and interesting, I was having this conversation with some of my colleagues this week. Like, you can create the best processes in the world, but who acts on it? Human beings. It can be the best, but if the human beings don't use it the right way, that's where you start seeing the problem. So I wouldn't say capitalism is the problem, but I would say how it's used is the problem. You can see really good examples out there as well, how it's used really well. And I wouldn't say, like some people say, socialism is bad because
yeah,
it
actually
becomes a
there was
welfare
a thing that they said that it was not bad, it was just how people used it was bad,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's how you use it. And if you use it in conjunction, I don't think it's a one or other. I think it's a, you use it in conjunction, and we can see real world examples out there from companies to countries. I forgot this company's name, but it's actually based in the States. It's a furniture company. It is a furniture company. I really forgot the name of it, but it's super good example. So this furniture company it was founded and it operates in a small town in the States. So what they do is, sure, very premium handcrafted furniture. That's what they do, and they sell it for a very high price. They do, because that's the value they kind of put to, okay, someone who's an artisan, who's got the expertise, who's going to spend time doing this, and there's only going to be limited number of these things. Hence, they're going to be sold for a higher value. But so that's capitalistic in nature. Most people think like, they're gouging, they're pricing it so high. Why? It's just a furniture. But then you find out what they do after that. Like, the money that they get back, it's not all for them to keep. They do things like, example, they take all wood, aluminium, plastic waste from the town that they are in. They buy it back. So that extra margin that they get, they buy that back. They send it for recycling, for them to get back raw materials, and then they use it in their production. So what's that start creating? That's creating a value to the society using capitalism plus socialism at the same time. Not only that, they have invested very heavily because they've got a huge site when it comes to their factory and creating this furniture. They've invested in a lot of solar panels that covers the entire roof. And what do they do with that? Yes, they produce a lot of power. So they are off the grid, essentially. They don't pay electricity. They are sustainable when it comes to energy. But because of the amount of solar panels that they have deployed, they actually produce more than they need. So what do they do with that? They give it to the society. They don't sell it they give it to the community or that town that they're in. And that then allows the town to sell back to the grid and make some money. And that helps the town build more things for the town's welfare. So you see, this is how you can use capitalistic practices together with socialistic practices to create value.
So here
And
is the question, Nigesh. What
yeah,
makes the difference? Is it people's mindset? Is it people's upbringing? Is it the instincts that we have that go wrong? Because if we say that one person can be like this, create something like this, and he's not the only or she's not the only one, there are many, many people doing
Mm.
amazing things all around the world.
Mm.
Why is it not general? Why do we kind of self-sabotage humanity by doing the wrong thing or choosing the wrong side? Or is it the wrong side? Like, I'm going very philosophical with you
Yeah.
right now, because I'm really interested in, okay, value-driven transformation in the paper, it's good. But what makes people not to choose that way? That's something that is interest me as a person interested in people. Like,
Right.
what makes them choose?
And this is going to be my thoughts on this and my opinions on this based on things that I've read and things that I've seen and things that I've experienced. Um, there is some fortunate and unfortunate things of being a human being. We are flawed in nature, and that's something we have to accept. And our flaws and some of our best moments come out when we are both alone and together, right? When we are alone, if we have the right experiences, the right knowledge, the right way of thinking, it helps us process things well in our own mind that we can decide what to do. But unfortunately, if we don't have those things, what if a person grew up like, sometimes it's very easy for us to uh, point the finger and blame the bugbear on this uber ultra rich people and their kids and how they are. But think for a second, like, what were their influences like? What was their life like? What are the things that they experienced? What was their reality? Did they know any different? Right? So if you don't know any different, and if you've kind of just lived your life in a certain way, that's your reality. And again, this is some things I've kind of understood, and this is my opinion again of how our brain functions. So there's this study on your brain's conscious thoughts versus your subconscious thoughts. Conscious thoughts is what you have right in front of you that you're processing at any one point in time based on what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, what you're hearing, and all that. So it's said that you can roughly, I don't know the exact figure, but roughly at any one point in time, you're processing 7 things on your conscious mind. Okay, 7 things. So only 7 things you've got in your conscious mind. But your subconscious mind is processing about 2,000 other things around you, right? And those 2,000 other things is framed by how you process things on your conscious mind. So think about that for a second. So if your life has been a certain way for a very, very long time, that's the way you think. And consciously every day, that 7 things that you keep on putting at the front of your mind and keep on working on is framed by that. How different is your world going to be? Right? And your subconscious is going to follow that. So if you are a person who, yes, you've lived that giving life, you've thought about always, look, I want to create value for other people. And that's how, like, your parents, the people around you, your society, everything is kind of formed that around you. Or you've been a super curious person that you may have grown up in a certain way, but you entertain that curiosity of yours and you went on that journey and that developed you as well. And that made consciousness for yourself. Then you become this person. But if your life has been, I'm from a very wealthy family. Every day I have people who serve me. Every day I've got no issues buying whatever I'm buying. Every day it's about how much money that I keep on making without doing anything at all. That's your reality. That's your reality. I'm not saying a person can't change, but I'm saying that think of it in that manner for a while, because then you see how people can have different kind of diasporas of how they act. And here's the other one: we always want to be a part of something. Human beings are societal creatures. Like it or not, we are societal creatures. We and it's not wrong. Like some people say that, a person who's a hermit, who's alone, is a weird person. Why do we say that? Because our natural instinct is to be societal. We're not saying the hermit person is crazy or anything like that. I think that's wrong to do that because, again, go back to the first thing I said, reality, right? What is the framing of reality for that hermit? And if that works for that person, that works for that person. But generally, we are societal creatures. And that problem of being or wanting to be part of a society means that we adjust the way we look at things when we feel we're starting to relate to a society. What does that do? Like we talk about, this is interesting, election periods going on here. There's a lot of this racial extremisms that kind of come out, and to like us here in the urban centers, we're like, why? Because everyone's human beings. Like, why do we need to look at the other person's race? But then there are people who follow it. There are people who prescribe to it, and you wonder what's wrong with these people. Maybe that's not the way to look at it. Let's go to the first thing. The first thing is how conscious versus subconscious mind, and then wanting to be part of a society. So it frames them into that being, and they follow that because they want to still stay in that society. Because for them, if that goes away, it's like suddenly you got to start anew. And there's one thing that all human beings fear. We always strive, and this is that whole theory of entropy, right? Like all matter tries to come to a stable form. It moves whichever way, but always try to come to a stable form. But when it starts moving away from stable form, it's like chaos, right? We work the same way. We always try to find some form of regimen, something that we can follow, something that is stable. But when it becomes something that is chaotic for us, we become very fearful. We feel like the ground is shifting under us. So that's why it makes it harder for people who may have been in a certain way of thinking to move out of it as well. It can be a good and bad thing. Like those who fortunately have developed these really good values, who look after each other, who look after society, that means they continue to stay there because that's their stable form. But on the other side, when example, if you look at what has happened in the United States just recently with the midterm elections, and you see this whole thing about MAGA and all that, and you sometimes wonder, like, I really don't get it. Like, I actually saw an interview of a person who said that doesn't matter if inflation goes up and everyone can't afford it, too bad. Those who can't afford it, too bad. Like, and I'm hearing that, I'm like, wow. I mean, you actually openly said that you wish harm to another human being. But then I took a step back and I'm like, wait a minute, like, what is that person's world? How has that person's world been formed? What are they hearing constantly? What are they exposed to constantly? Who are they with constantly? What's forming their day-to-day? And if that's the case, then unfortunately, that person is there. But maybe for the rest of us, it's not to say that that person is bad. And I think that's where that whole polarization starts happening, where you have one camp here, one camp there. If we can think on the line of, okay, I can empathize with what's happening. If I can impart bit by bit something to these people, maybe I may not see in my lifetime, but maybe they might start finding that middle ground. It's not to invalidate what you're thinking. It's this: I respect what you think, I respect who you are, but how can we live together? And when we can live together, that's where I'm going to see, how can I value you? What can I do to value you? And then that starts changing to your actions. And then that starts changing to companies, that start changing to products that you bring up. So I think to answer your question, that was my idea. That's how I kind of look at things, like why we are having these problems that we're having.
No, I love it. I think that's a very nice picture that people can imagine. And I always was fan of perspectives, changing hats and feeling how the other person is feeling, because it's just, my truth is maybe not your truth, and what what makes me say that your truth is wrong when, as you said, you have been conditioned in this truth for your whole life? And then how would I just say that, okay, suddenly you have to change, right, from one day to the other? It's impossible.
Yeah.
So I believe that there is solution on focusing on those people and bringing those people together who are game changers, who are bringing change in today's world. But it's also like you do, there is a huge opportunity in education, because when it starts with kids, when it starts with conditioning, it starts in the childhood, right? So when you open those kids up and when you educate them right, then it's harder to corrupt them by whatever is happening around them, right, Nigesh?
That's one thing as well. Like, I think we also need to kind of move away from that thought where whatever happens to us as kids and as we're growing up is what we get locked into. No, not at all. I think anybody, and I think this has been scientifically proven, anybody, no matter what their brain synapses has been connected with, can change. Those synapses can change. It just depends on the influence around you that will change that. Like, I would say this, like in my younger days, when it comes to timing, I was horrible at time. And that was my reality. My reality is like, if I make it, it's fine, kind of thing, right? But it was a habit. It was a habit that I constantly lived by. I remember my friends saying that, look, I live in my own time zone. I've got this, they call it GNT, Greenwich Nigesh time. Because, and that is about 30 minutes to an hour behind real world time, right? And that was habitual for me. But I changed that. Over time. And it's because, thankfully, I always remained curious in my life. And the one question I started asking myself when I started noticing other people is how they felt about it. Some may make jokes about it, but I started thinking, like, well, how am I impacting these people? Like, am I adding value to them, or am I taking value away from them? It's their time. I'm not respecting them. How, if I'm a person who has a lot to add to the world, how are they going to listen to me if I don't respect them with this simple thing, which is I respect their time and I'm there when they call me? And I changed my habit. Even like one of the things I do constantly, my whole fitness thing as well, it is to change habit. And everybody can look at their lives and find these things. Like, you have done it. Every single person in this world has done it in some way or some form. Just look back to that and remember, it doesn't mean that if you were built with certain things when you grew up, that's where you end up with. And some may argue, like, look, some are deeper than these kind of things. Some are psychological in nature. And I even dare argue and say that even these psychological things, what if, example, you meet a person who's got psychological issue, whether it's depression, manic depression, schizophrenia, and all that kind of thing. It's easy for us to pass off and say, like, oh, that person has problems. That person needs to go and see a shrink. That person needs to go and see a psychiatrist. But can that person do it? Remember what I said about that whole, you live in your reality. For them, that's reality. If we really want to add value, could we be that person, as painful as it is, to actually take that person and go to a psychiatrist? As much as the person may like kick and scream or whatever, but you take that person and bring them to a psychiatrist and start that process of change. That's at a human level how you've added value to somebody. And that person can change. They will find new ways how to live.
I think this was a thought-provoking conversation again. I'm so thankful for you for being here week by week and adding your thoughts and philosophical deep thoughts that it makes just more interesting to listen to something like this, and it triggers. I hope it triggers thought-provoking processes. And as you said, we give value as you do, then the change is happening and a transformation is coming. So walk the talk, guys. Try to do and make the change. Try to create the value, and then you will see transformation in your lives. Yep. I believe that's the message of today's session about value-driven transformation. Thank you so much, Nigesh, for being here.
I will let you
enjoy your weekend, and
Time to
keep
go
your
vote.
eyes
Time
on
to
this
go vote.
life-changing event in Malaysia.
Yep. We will all know tonight about 12 a.m. or 1 a.m. We'll know what has happened in Malaysia.
Curious. So all the best, Nigesh, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Andrea, and have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye. So thank you for watching, guys. This was the morning session of the Saturday of the fourth weekend of the Global Empowerment Summit. We will be coming back in the afternoon at 3 p.m. With two amazing guys talking about sustainability and about building it right. And then we will have our sustainable panels about everything about sustainability with Terry and his friends. Terry is a TEDx speaker, and he will bring amazing people who are bringing change to society. And then in the evening, we have two more talks tonight with different topics around Web3 and continuing exploring digital transformation and sustainability. So I'm going on a break. Have a little break for you too. For those who are in Malaysia, enjoy your amazing, important day. Make the most out of it, and then make sure that you choose the right things. And I just wish you a beautiful day in this sunny day. Have a little time outside with your family in the nature. And we are back in the afternoon. Goodbye, guys.